Good morning, everybody. Welcome in to Coffee Break presented by Superbook Sports. We hope you all are having a wonderful Friday. The weekend is almost here. I have fresh hair, Will Peterson. It's a good Friday. How are you?
I'm doing well. What do you mean by fresh hair?
Listen, as a female, I know the ladies in the comments will get it. It is a whole process to wash your hair. It's like a 2 hour process. And this morning I washed my hair. I'm feeling very good. I'm like, all right, it's a good day. Let's have a great Friday.
Let's do it. I washed my hair too. I don't think it took as long as yours did.
It's a 2 hour process. We don't have to get into it. I won't bore you with the process of dealing with a bunch of hair. My only advice to you
That's
is
about 90 seconds.
don't ever grow out your hair. That's going to be my advice to you. And I love having long hair, but it takes so long for it to dry. You have to double shampoo to get all the product out. It's a whole thing, and it just is what it is. But good morning to you. Jake Shapiro is going to join us here in a second. Troy, happy Friday. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Coffee Break. There's a lot to get into. Obviously, we've got a big Nuggets game tonight, one that Jokic is essentially saying is a must win. We're also going to be talking about Valerina Nichushkin and the 911 call that has left me with even more questions. And then Andrew Mason is going to join the show too. But you were on the Zoakley show. You hosted it with James Merrill. How was it yesterday?
Yeah, it's fun. I always enjoy filling in for Zach and Stoke. They've got such a huge following, so many great listeners. So it's always fun when the text line, tells you tuned in for Zach and Stokely and got James and some other guy. So I'm like, okay, I'm some other guy. But no, 99% of people were nice and some good spirited debate. That's all we want, right? I don't care if you disagree with me. You just, you don't have to go full troll on me. But we had fun, and that 11 to 2 slot, Rachel, that's the sweet spot of the day. But the tough part is you don't think about lunch. And for Zach and Stoke, like anyone who's been in the office during their show knows, like their whole day revolves around lunch, right? Like it's constantly where are they ordering from, who's going to pick it up, if it's getting delivered, who's going downstairs to get it, how quick can they eat during the breaks of their show.
Yep.
And, me and James are just like, we're rookies on that show. I've done it, I don't know, 5 or 6 times I've filled in. And every time around like 12:15, 12:30, I'm like, crap, I am hungry. What am I going to do for lunch?
No, 100%. And honestly, one of my favorite things about that is when Brandon Stokely has lunch delivered and he goes and gets it from the, Uber Eats driver or whoever it is. And they always recognize him, but like they can't put it to a T of who exactly he is. I've seen this multiple times where they're just like looking at him so intensely. And Stoke, of course, is just like his goofy self. And he's like, all right, like, thanks everybody. And then the second the Uber driver like walks away, they get on their phone so fast because I guarantee they're texting somebody like, you won't believe who I just delivered to. And like, not trying to harp on Stoke by any means, but like I wouldn't say he's the biggest celebrity here in Denver, but he is a big name for sure. So it's always so funny. Like I love walking down at the exact perfect time with him when he's getting his food for that reason and that reason alone. Because people are just like, oh my gosh, it's Brandon Stokely.
No, that is a great story because we have so many coworkers that, to you and I, we obviously respect their athletic careers, but now in these days they're just coworkers. But between Mark Schlereth and Chad Brown and Orlando Franklin and Brandon Stokely and Derek Wolf, and then even guys like Noshan Moreno come and fill in every once in a while.
Yep.
But between that roster, you go around Denver with these people and they are full-fledged celebrities, which is awesome because it makes the rest of us like I've been to events where had like one or two people come up to me and say, "You that like Will kid?" And I'm like, "Yeah,"
No.
And then Derek Wolf walks in. He's got a line of 50 people, and they all want pictures and autographs and stuff. So it is funny that they all are still very well respected and have quite the local fame from their playing days.
No, they do, 100%. All right, let's bring in Jake Shapiro on this Friday. And I owe Jake an apology, actually, because yesterday was his birthday, and I did not sing to him on Coffee Break like he did for me. You guys all did for me. And Jake, I won't embarrass you because I know you're not into that, but I do want to say happy belated birthday. I looked down at I was driving yesterday leaving the office, and I looked down and I was like, it's May 4th. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Jake's birthday. And I called him back after talking to him already. And I was like, Jake, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. So again, our apologies, but happy birthday, my friend.
The big 2-8. Let's go.
Ooh, 2-8 and getting married this year. Going to is the Olympics this summer or next summer? Next
Next
summer,
summer,
right?
2024. I think the
Yeah.
weirdest part of my life currently, and I guess this is probably way too many details, but I'm basically living my father's life over again, and I love my dad, so I have no problem with it. But like, my dad is exactly 30 years older than me, like nearly like just a couple months off on that.
Okay.
Graduated high school in 83. I graduated high school in 13. He got married at 28. I'm getting married at 28. He took 5 years in college, went to two different schools. I went to one, but took 5 years in college. Worked at like a similar style restaurant when we were in high school and college. Like it's like to a T, like to the point where I'm starting to like be like, am I Jeff, not Jake?
Well, I love it. And if that is the case, then you're going to want to have an absolutely beautiful home in Texas one day with two very cute dogs. So I'll
Yeah.
give you that. That it's going to work out for you.
Well, and real quick, I'm gonna be that guy. If the pattern holds, Jake, that means you're becoming a dad in 2 years. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. If this all continues on.
We're hoping that that's not going to be the same pattern.
Okay.
We're going to try and hold that line. Um, but I'll take my Marshall Falk birthday for now, and we'll move past that because that's scary. Will That's
Yeah,
very
you're like an
scary.
athlete. You're giving me the cliche right now. I'm taking it one day at a time, man. I'm not
You know,
I'm not committing to that kids thing.
I remember the day, like I think it was in high school, like my freshman year of college, where I was like, oh my God, I am now closer to having a child than being a child. And I'm like, this is so scary. Like it happened like when I was like 19 or 18. I was like, this is not okay.
Yeah. No, I feel that. And I love that Will went to just, kids right away and I went to the dogs because I'm a dog mom and so that's where my whole like world surrounds is the dog that's in the other room over there. Jake, you are obviously though a huge Nuggets fan. Is your dad? Is your dad a big Nuggets fan?
Well, my middle name is Jordan, so
Basketball fan.
that kind of gives it away. But because the Bulls and the Nuggets are in separate conferences, and my dad went to DU, and we lived here for about 15 years. Well, he did, and I still live here, obviously. He got into the Nuggets around the same time I did, around
Mhm.
J.R. Smith, Carmelo Anthony, Allen Iverson, and there was never having to decide between the two. Like the Blackhawks and Avalanche for him, same conference. He doesn't want to root for them. Rockies and Cubs, same league. He didn't want to root for both. So that was never a problem with the Bulls and Nuggets. So he
Mhm.
always has really liked the Nuggets as well. And he grew up going to, or not grew up, but in college went to see Alex English play all the time when he was at DU in the 80s. So he likes the Nuggets a lot. He's constantly sending me little texts about Nikola Jokic, which is just hilarious. And again, living the same life as my father, me and my fiance have discussed naming our child something Nikola Jokic inspired, just like I am Jordan inspired. So there you go.
Wow. Are we talking like first name, middle name?
Well, I think for a girl, Nicola is a beautiful name. But it would be sick for like, like you imagine like the 5-year-old boy on the playground and his middle name is just Joker. That's pretty sick.
It's
Okay,
pretty dope.
yeah, it would be pretty cool. It would be pretty cool. Jake, obviously tonight's game, Jokic is calling it a must win. Who's the pressure on really? Is it on the Suns to, not go down in this series 3-0, or is it on the Nuggets to actually get a road win essentially?
Yeah, I think the overall pressure on this series is actually on the Nuggets just because so much is riding on this year. And what is Nikola Jokic if not just a regular season player, according to some people? We obviously have seen some great playoff performances, but that gets lost in the muck because he hasn't won a championship yet. So I think the pressure overall is on the Nuggets, but in this individual game three, it's 100% on the Suns because no team in NBA history has ever come back from down 3-0. If the Nuggets win tonight, the series is over. It's just a matter of when. Right now, up 2-0, the series is more or less over. The Nuggets just haven't put the nail in the coffin yet. So the Suns need to avoid having the nail be put in the coffin and just leave some breathing space. I mean, Rachel, if it comes back to Denver 2-2, we're all going to be freaking out, even with the Nuggets feeling pretty good about themselves. So I say the Nuggets need a split. They probably need to get game four, but I do think they're probably getting Game 3 tonight as well.
Will Peterson.
Yeah, I think Jake nailed it there. I mean, listen, if the Suns don't win tonight, they're doing the same thing the Wolves did, 1-2-3 Cancun, right? I know the Wolves rallied to win Game 4, but the inevitable was always going to happen in that series. It's a reason that it's been 50 years or whatever, and no one's ever come back from 3-0. But I will say this about pressure individually tonight. It's on Jamal Murray because he was so good in Game 1, and he was so hyped up, and then he went on the NBA on TNT and got asked 2 bubble questions and got super grumpy about it with, the legendary Charles Barkley and Kenny the Jet Smith. And then in Game 2, he came out and laid a total egg. So Jamal's got to bounce back tonight because part of the reason he's still bubble Murray is because that was the most consistent stretch of his career. Game 1, he was awesome. No one's going to deny that. But Game 2, he was 0 of 9 from 3. That just can't happen. They're not going to win on the road if that happens again. So you want to drop bubble Murray, don't lay eggs. So I think it's a big bounce back spot for Jamal Murray tonight. So individually, that's where a lot of pressure lies.
That's a really good point, too, Will, of how much pressure, is on Jamal Murray. Let's play the numbers game. What's considered a bounce back game for him? If he goes, 3 for 11 and at least he made 1 3-pointer, or does he need to go 9 of 11 and have another fantastic game, Jake?
Give me 20 points. It can be on 25 shots, but just give me 20 points, maybe 2 or 3 threes, some playmaking. So give me 20 and 6 in 4 boards, and that'll be plenty for the Nuggets. The most interesting quotes that have come out of the last 24 to 48 hours are actually not Nikola Jokic talking about a sweep or Charles Barkley, which I know Will just wrote about for DenverSports.com, and we're going to get to. Yep. Monty Williams, the head coach of the Suns, said that they are going to play TJ Warren and Terrence Ross moving forward, and they're going to just have to live, quote, with the warts that come with those guys. Essentially, the Suns, because of the Chris Paul injury, instead of shortening their bench, are now going to decide to deepen their bench and be more fresh and throw more guys at the problem. TJ Warren and Terrence Ross have been really good NBA players for a very long time. TJ Warren averaged 16 points per game a year this season. Nobody in this series for the Suns outside of their big 4 is averaging 4 points per game. So this is needed scoring. The problem is both these guys at this point in his career suck on defense, just suck. Mm-hmm. So the Nuggets are going to be able to take advantage of these guys when they're on the floor. The issue is it's going to be a little bit maybe more scoring and a different attack than what we've seen. So whatever you get out of Jamal is probably going to be fine, because what we've learned this playoffs is it doesn't need to be Jamal playing well. It just needs to be Jamal playing, and that's what puts the Nuggets on a different level.
Our good friends at Superbook Sports, obviously a sponsor of Coffee Break. They have Jamal at over/under 23.5 points tonight. That is a fine line right there, right down the middle. I feel like where we would all go. Will, you taking the over or the under?
No, I'm taking the over. 23.5, that feels low to me just because I think Jamal's going to fire because he loves to keep shooting at the hoop, and he's going to make more shots tonight. What we saw in Game 2 was an aberration. That's not going to happen again. He gets hot early. He's got Terrence Ross and TJ Warren on the floor. The Nuggets might score 130 tonight. So, yeah, give me over 23.5.
Jake?
I'll play under, just because Jamal, I don't think, has gone over 22 in a road playoff game yet. Granted, there's only been 2. But give me the under, and I'm going to say just under. I don't think he's having a bad game. I just think it's going to be 20 points.
All right. Well, we all know Jamal does have a pretty good memory, and I feel like sometimes that can play against him where he gets a little bit in his own head. So I'm going to take the under. I just hope that, he went to the podium when he wasn't asked to, and I think he kind of used that as a coping mechanism of like, hey, I had a bad day. I'm just going to laugh it off. But I am a little bit worried that this might linger a little bit into the game, and just because of everything that Jamal Murray has gone through, I feel like sometimes that can happen. I do see a question in the comments, though, and says, do you guys think that this team has the mental fortitude to rebound if they get beat down tonight, Jake?
Yeah, totally. They're not going to get beat down. I don't see a way in which the Suns win this by more than just a handful of points. But two, yeah, they totally can respond. They can rebound. We talked a lot about what happened at the end of the regular season with the Rockets and these other teams and blah, blah, blah. Not only that, but in the Timberwolves series when they got their butts handed to them in the third quarter of the second game, and then in the fourth quarter the fourth quarter and overtime of game 4 they suffer a pretty tough loss, all things considered. Like, the most ridiculous shot went in for them to lose that game and not pull off the sweep. They bounced right back. I have no doubts that this team has the ability to just put their head down and keep going, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not only because Nikola Jokic is a superhuman that lacks sometimes emotion in a good way, like he just keeps trucking on. It's because of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. It's because of DeAndre Jordan and Jeff Green. They have guys who have been there, done that. And this is the perfect mix of young players, players in their prime, and veterans. And this is why this team does not get in its own head. And it is just okay, that 48 minutes is over, time to move on to those other 40 minutes. I'll give you a little more on that Jamal thing of him coming to the podium. When I covered baseball, and granted, these guys have therapists and these guys have sports psychologists and stuff, but baseball players really like talking to the media sometimes before and after games because it allows them to talk their process out. And like just kind of talk about where they're at. And some of it's on the record, some of it's off. And some of it's like super dry and not that interesting. It's a little bit different for Jamal to do that in front of like 50 media members on a podium, but maybe he just needed to talk about it. Like that could be it.
And that's exactly what I think it is. Well, we'll get your opinion here in just a second. I feel like it was a coping mechanism. Instead of being like, oh, I'm going to have to talk to the media later this week and I'm going to have to defend myself, he's like, let's just get it over with right now and like allow me to, I don't want to say make fun of myself, but to acknowledge the fact that I went 0 from 9 from the 3 and that I've never had that kind of stat before in my life. Well,
yeah, the only question, and you two both go to the games for the Nuggets, so I'll throw it right back at you. Could he have just talked at his locker? Why did he have to talk at the podium?
Great question.
And that's interesting because he could have talked at his locker. I don't know that he would have talked at his locker. I think he was making a concerted effort to show people he wanted to talk to people because he had such a bad game. I talked to Jeff Green the other night, and he literally said, "Why are you talking to me? I did nothing." and
Hey, he had a good dunk.
Yeah, and then one of the media members goes, "You had a great dunk on the baseline." He goes, "I forgot about that."
Honestly, and I feel too, maybe because it's timed. We only get, I think it's 8 minutes at the podium, and at your locker, really, if people just keep asking you questions, there's rarely anyone in there that's going to be like, all right, stop. And I feel like for Jamal, people could probably talk to him for 10, 15 minutes. So maybe 2 because it's timed and he knows he only has to talk for 8 minutes. And he did it with KCP. So it was even really less pressure to be put on him than just having to answer questions alone. That's just my, opinion. I don't know if that's actually the reason, but I feel like it could play into it.
No, but I think what Jake said is spot on about the therapy aspect of this. Like, we all in life have problems, right? Every single person watching this has problems. All 3 of us have problems. And you feel a lot better when you talk about your problems. So, yeah, it's not a real-world problem for Jamal Murray, but he just had a terrible game, and luckily his team still won. But he wanted to get it all off his chest so he could go to bed that night and move on with his life, and I'm sure that's what he did. And the biggest thing, like I said, is the Nuggets got the victory. So that's all that matters, right?
That's absolutely true. And I agree. I've tweeted out stuff and I've been able to come on coffee break and like talk it out, and I feel so much better after it. For both of you, what grade would you give Aaron Gordon's regular season, and just regular season overall, if you had to give him a grade? Jake?
A+.
Will?
I mean, I can expand on it, but it was an A+.
Okay, I'll get back to it, I promise.
It was an A-. He was really, really good for the first 3 months, and then the injury, his play fell off from that all-star level it was in December, January, and February. Now, that's not his fault. I'm not blaming him for getting injured, but objectively, his play just wasn't as good, so that dings him just a little bit in my eyes and takes him down to the A- level.
And we can probably all agree that so far in this Sun series, he's an A, if not an A+, yes?
Definitely. I mean, he was so good in Game 1. That was his best game he had played in months, it felt like. He was awesome that night.
So good. So what happens if AG falls off? How can this team essentially, still try and find somebody that can hold on to Kevin Durant in this series and be as beneficial, because I feel like AG is a quiet, unsung hero, even though a lot of people know him. I've called him Mr. Consistent, but I feel like he doesn't always get as much credit as maybe he should for how well the Nuggets are playing in this series, Jake.
AG is the second most important person on the Nuggets. It's Nikola Jokic, and I mean, it's not a close second because Nikola's obviously quite literally invaluable. Um, but it's AG that is so important because of his defensive abilities, his ability to not only guard the ball sometimes, but I mean, we saw him guard Damian Lillard in a playoff game. We've seen him now guard Kevin Durant. He's guarding 1 through 5 essentially. He's an unbelievable player. I don't think that there is going to be a fall off with his defense. If he suddenly stops shooting threes and his free throws stop falling like they did at the regular season at one point, that's going to suck. But ultimately, he's someone that the Nuggets need to play no matter what. And the great thing about AG, unless he's seriously injured and he's trying to play through it, you can always just put him right on the block and he's going to be able to clean up rebounds and dunk it like no one's business. So I don't see there's a world in which AG is not effective. I see a world where he is maybe less effective, but he going forward, let's say the Nuggets run into the Lakers, he is the guy who's going to guard LeBron James. If the Nuggets run into the Celtics, he is the guy who's going to guard Jason Tatum. If the Nuggets run into the Heat, he is the guy who's likely going to guard Jimmy Butler. AG is the key that unlocks the Nuggets to the next level, or at least defensively. And I think he's been awesome in this series. He's had an awesome regular season. It's been the best year of his career, and it would be amazing if it ended with a title.
Well,
yeah, I mean, listen, AG is so key to these Nuggets. He's to use a bad cliche, he's the straw that stirs the drink, right? Because he's the guy that he just makes everything come together on both sides of the basketball for this team. I'll disagree with Jake a little bit. I think he's their third most important player, but he's certainly more important than MPJ. I still think Jamal slots in at number 2. Everyone always wants to talk about Jokic, Jamal, MPJ, this three-headed monster. We've seen flashes of that, but really the three-headed monster is Jokic, Jamal, AG, and MPJ is more of a wild card in my book. So, yeah, AG is huge, and if he falls off, I agree with Jake. It would be on the offensive end. Defense isn't something you forget to do overnight, and that's his biggest value to this Nuggets team. 23 in Game 1 was huge. You kind of have to look at that as bonus. You're not going to get 23 from him every night.
I'm actually going to argue back with you on the second best player, because if AG hadn't played as great of defense, or even made a few of the shots that he did come Game 2, they probably wouldn't have won that game. Jamal obviously laid an egg, and yet they were still able to win the game.
Jamal's not going to
I think the frame, though, to me was most important. And to me, Jamal is the second most important, because look at what the Nuggets were in the last 2 playoffs without Jamal Murray, guys. They were 1-8. They were terrible. They got swept, and they lost in 5, and they should have gotten swept if Will Barton didn't make a miracle 3. I guess a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So Jamal Murray is the reason they can now win playoff games. So he's the second most important player. I respect the Aaron Gordon argument, but Aaron Gordon's played, and they went 1-8. Jamal Murray's playing now, and these playoffs they're 6-1.
All right, yeah, you're right. I forgot the fact that the Nuggets don't even have a backup point guard. So Will's right. They need Jamal. It's just they've put themselves in a position where they completely rely upon Jamal. So for the Nuggets, he's their second most important player. I misspoke. Their second best player throughout the course of the season this year probably has been Aaron Gordon. He is their most important player defensively, however, but because of what Jamal and Nikola can do, I mean, that puts Jamal in a different category, but we're splitting hairs here. Like, both of these guys are going to be around for forever, hopefully. They're signed to long-term deals. They're both hopefully going to be healthy. And they both are perfect complementary players for Nikola Jokic. And it's just a hats off to both Tim Conley and Calvin Booth and Michael Malone for putting these guys around Nikola Jokic and then developing their skill set to make them like this. Aaron Gordon was not this perfect Nikola Jokic player when he was first traded. Yes, he fit in well, but Aaron has put it upon himself to do absolutely everything that Nikola says and to fit in perfectly around Nikola. again, the most interesting thing that happened to me in game 2 was Nikola Jokic on the court telling Aaron Gordon, hey, this coverage is not going to work. Do this next time this happens. The very next play, that exact same situation comes up, and Aaron listened to Nikola to a T, and it ended up with Josh Okogie terrified and a really terrible Kevin Durant and a shot clock shot. So the trust that these guys have and the trust that they have in their best player just shows you a lot. I mean, I was watching a mic'd up video of Bruce Brown and another one of what's his name, Bones Highland, the other day, like just the best of Nuggets mic'd up. And I was so impressed with the way Nikola Jokic communicates on the court with his teammates and the way they respect him, because he is not that respected nationally, as we have found out. But when people come in here, it just took Ish Smith like 2 or 3 games of sitting on the bench to be like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? Bruce Brown and KCP, after the first couple preseason games, they were like, I was told about this, I didn't really get it, and now I get it. So the way he is respected by his teammates, I think makes it so that he can win a title and this team can win a title, because you do need that respect in your best player. And the Nuggets have never had that in franchise history. Carmelo was the best player for sure, but him and AI were trying to figure out who was the leader. You know, Chauncey Billups came in here and was the leader, even though Carmelo Anthony was the best player. David Thompson, I can't really speak to it of whether he had that singular way about him, but he's obviously in that class of player. Alex English was never that good. So Nikola Jokic represents for the Nuggets something that the Nuggets have never had, and that's why I'm so titillated and have been about this team for the last couple months.
Well, and you said Jokic doesn't get the national respect that he should. And Mike and Mark were joined by Charles Barkley earlier this morning, and Mike asked Charles Barkley about that. Go ahead and take a listen to this fantastic answer.
For me, then, is why doesn't the NBA world at large embrace Jokic the way that they embrace a Giannis or a Luka or an Embiid? What's the disconnect?
Well, I think that, number one, they've got to break through. They got to at least get to the finals. You can't have the NBA's – the Nuggets probably in the last 5 years – I don't even have the numbers in front of me, but I bet the Nuggets are one of the 5 best records in the NBA. And they haven't got to the finals. And then, you remember, a couple times they got swept. And I think until you prove it, hey, people are going to hold that against you. And that's just the way it is. Now, like I say, I'm telling you right now, if I had a stack of money right now, and somebody says you got to put all your money on one of these teams, there's no doubt in my mind I'm going with the Nuggets, flat out going with them. And like I say, I was so impressed with them the other night, because that's the best defense I've ever seen them play in a knockdown, drag-out game. So the Suns can't beat them on talent. The Suns, they don't have enough players. Kevin or Devin would have to go crazy. Not just a 35-point. They'd have to go like Jimmy Butler, all nuclear, because they just don't have the depth. So, like I say, man, I think they are the favorite. I think most people think they're the favorites. So, man, I can't wait to see how this thing's going to turn out.
Oh, man, I really loved watching that clip and listening to that entire conversation with Mike and Mark. Highly recommend. Will Peterson wrote an article at denversports.com. What stood out to you guys the most? Because for me, it was him saying the Suns don't have the talents that the Nuggets do. Like, Booker or Kevin Durant would just have to go absolutely crazy for them to even stand a chance, and it's just not realistic to do to win the rest of the series. But Will, you obviously listened to the entire, it's like a 15-minute clip. What was your, biggest takeaway from it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you played a great clip there, and I would encourage people to go read it at denversports.com. I linked to the full interview if people want to hear the full thing. But Chuck, on his own, the biggest thing to me, on his own, without being prompted by Mike or Mark, said 2 different times, first of all, that no one in the West or no one in the East is better than the Nuggets, and they're going to win the NBA title, and that if he had a fat stack of money, he would put it down on the Nuggets to win the NBA championship. So that was just 2 unprompted quotes from Chuck of like, yeah, he knows he's on in Denver, and yeah, he's hamming it up for the Denver audience. but he went out of his way to say twice he thinks the Nuggets are going to win the whole thing. So he had some great breakdowns on this specific series. He had some awesome stuff on the Jokic MVP controversy with Embiid. Chuck hates Kendrick Perkins. He made that perfectly clear. He went on and on about how ridiculous Kendrick Perkins is. And then he also said all the dum-dums, his word not mine, who want to suggest that Jamal Murray is the best player on the Nuggets need to go watch basketball because Nikola Jokic is the second or third best player in the world. So it was just a fascinating interview. Classic Chuck. Great job by Mark and Mike to get him on the show. Would encourage people to go read it at denversports.com. But like I said, for him to go out of his way twice to say the Nuggets are going to win the NBA championship, that's a pretty big endorsement.
You know, this is me right now. Chugga, 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 choo, choo. I am leading the Nuggets bandwagon, the train. It has left the station. It left the station months ago. But we're going to circle back. We're going to hit the junction, and we're going to pick up Charles Barkley on the way to our next stop. Because Charles Barkley, welcome on to the Denver Nuggets bandwagon. We appreciate your services.
Oh my gosh, I love the interview. I love, like you said, that Mike and Mark were able to get him on. But you guys, I feel like it does feel like this is the year. It felt this way last year with the Colorado Avalanche. It really does feel like this. And so I do welcome everybody to jump on the train right now with Jake as he's back at the junction, because I think the next couple of weeks, and hopefully, I mean, we've got 4 weeks until the finals actually would begin. Like, I hope it's a lot of fun. And hopefully the Nuggets get a lot of rest in it too.
Yeah. I was thinking about this last night. I was watching the Warriors-Lakers game, and whoever wins that would be the Nuggets' next opponent. And every time someone mentions this, by the way, the next series, I'm like, can we just please live in the now, because the now is so exciting. I don't want to go ahead, but I'm just going to jump ahead for 1 second for this note. If the Nuggets win in 4 games, that would be Friday and Sunday.
Yep.
The Lakers-Warriors game 3 would be Saturday. There's a chance this series goes really long, with them already having split in Golden State. So we're looking at the Denver Nuggets potentially with a huge gap between their next game again, after having this big gap of 3 days off in between these 2 games as well. So there's a chance, with the way this goes, and we're talking about the finals on June 1st when it starts, that the Denver Nuggets only play 8 games in the month of May. Like, that's a real possibility. So it's going to be up to Michael Malone, who I thought did a really good job between Series 1 and Series 2 of keeping these guys fresh and locked in, because these guys came out firing in Game 1 against the Suns. To the point they came out firing so much in those 2 games that everyone thinks this series is over already. So, yeah, what Charles Barkley's saying, the Nuggets are clearly the most talented team in the West. They might be the most talented team in basketball right now, the best set-up team in basketball. And while the Philadelphia 76ers play their MVP through a knee injury, the Boston Celtics look like a shell of what they were last year, with a rookie coach, by the way. And the Heat and Knicks, who are lousy but are battling. And the Lakers and Warriors are just 2 old teams trying to figure it out. Like, it's very clear that the Nuggets are the best positioned team to win a title. So if the Denver Nuggets, on your local Superbook or wherever you place your wagers, like Charles Barkley is suggesting, if the Denver Nuggets are not the favorites, you are getting value in you placing your bet right now, which is why I understand why Charles Barkley is saying that.
No, 100%. All right. Well, we do have to talk about the Colorado Avalanche again, because Will Peterson, you wrote a really good article. Jake, thank you so much. Appreciate it. You wrote a really good article again, because we got the 911 call from Seattle about Valerie Nichushkin. And honestly, I'm going to let you describe it. I have even more questions now about what actually happened and where Nichushkin is than I did before we got the 911 call. Even though it kind of cleared up a few things, it just opened up more doors for me. Do you feel the exact same way?
Yeah, I mean, the Seattle Times, first of all, we got to give them the credit. They were the ones who went through the channels to obtain the 911 call. So we are citing the Seattle Times on this. Denver Sports did not obtain this. I have not heard it. But the 2 quotes that stood out were, first of all, the unidentified caller on the 911 call, but we have to make it clear that the police report said the caller was the Avalanche's team doctor, Bradley Changstrom, said that they found this woman who is borderline unconscious. She's going in and out. It's either severe alcohol poisoning or something may have been slipped in her drink, is what the Avalanche team doctor said. So that is obviously disturbing if they thought, maybe she was drugged. And then the other thing too, Rachel, is that, they said she's barely hanging on. And we still haven't gotten an update on this woman. So that's really concerning as well. As, the Avs team doctor is obviously focused on knee injuries and arm injuries, but he's a doctor. He can tell when someone is on the brink of life or death. So that's really scary. And then the final thing, the mystery in this is that he just said, we've got her by the front door for the paramedics or the fire to come get her. So clearly she was moved from Nichushkin's room where she was found, which we know that because of the police report, to the front door. Obviously, if they were able to get her into the lobby, that makes it easier for EMT, right? It's a quicker process to get someone in a stretcher into an ambulance if she's already right by the lobby. But it also raises questions about why was she moved out of Nichushkin's room? Was there anything in Nichushkin's room that folks didn't want law enforcement or paramedics or fire to see? So we don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that. It's a good way to get sued. So we're just relaying the facts here. But she was moved from Nichushkin's room to the lobby.
One way or another, though, it seems to just be getting worse and worse. Like the look for Nichushkin, the fact that it comes out and is like maybe something was slipped in her drink, they don't know. Like that's a very bad look overall for absolutely anyone. Will, this whole story just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, in my opinion, and I don't know what to take away from it anymore. It's just like, maybe, do I not want to hear anything else? Like, do I just need to like stop because I'm so worried about this woman, first of all, but it's just a worse and worse scenario, and we're still not getting any other answers. It's just more and more questions.
Yeah, it's a slow puzzle to piece together. And one of the things that I guess sort of bothered me in a way was a lot of Facebook, Twitter tough folks said, this isn't anything new. We didn't learn anything new. Well, I just spent 90 seconds explaining what we learned that was new. The 911 call did reveal new details. I know it's not all the answers, so maybe people are frustrated by that. Like you said, it keeps leading to more questions. But to just read an article and say that didn't tell us anything new, well, your reading comprehension skills just aren't very good because it did tell us a lot that was new. So maybe go back and read it a second time for everyone who felt that way. There was new details. I understand it's a frustrating, like I said, puzzle to put together. But you're right. The more we learn, the more this angle for Nichushkin just doesn't look so hot. And there's a reason the Avalanche really haven't come out and said anything, Rachel, because it could turn into a legal situation. It's not yet. We don't know. And also, do they want to support Nichushkin? We're not sure, right? Like, it'd be easy to release a statement saying, we love and support Valeri and want him to get help he needs or whatever. They haven't said anything about loving and supporting Valeri Nichushkin. So that tells you all you need to know about where their minds may be at, particularly with what they want to do with him this offseason.
And the biggest question is, we still don't know where he is. And that is just another one of those. You think we would have heard something by now. Something would have got leaked as to where he is. We have no idea where one of the Avalanche star players still is. And I know the season's over with, so we're not hearing from anybody in the organization anymore, but it's still like, usually some people can find out something on it, so it just makes it seem like the people that may know are really keeping tight lips because it's a serious thing.
I mean, the only thing I would say on that, Rachel, is we talked about this on Stokely and Zach, not yesterday, but when I was on with them last week. And Dan Jacobs, who obviously has a lot of legal experience, the judge, did chime in and said, if he's in some sort of treatment facility, no one can disclose that. That's a HIPAA type deal. So you don't have reporters digging on that. You're certainly not going to have the team confirm it. So put it this way, if he was in jail, that's a matter of public record. We would know. Jared Bednar has said it's not a legal situation. But if he's getting treatment somewhere, then we would not know that. So I'm not saying that's where he is. I have no idea where Valeri Nichushkin is, but it is just another nugget to consider in all this.
No, for sure. And of course, we're still all just sad that the Colorado Avalanche are not playing hockey anymore. But Will Peterson, an absolute pleasure hanging out with you again today. Thank you so much. Will being fantastic because DMAC is obviously out sick. We all knew that 2 days ago when he was losing his voice, and Will willing to fill in at any cost. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Always appreciate you having me on. And we'll talk to you next week. Hopefully D-Mac's back Monday. I'm keeping my
fingers crossed. We got to get that throat nice and rested. That way he can do his 6 hours of talking that he does every single day. All right, Will Peterson, as we will bring in Andrew Mason to talk a little bit about the Denver Broncos because, well, first of all, good morning. Happy Friday, Mace. How are you?
Happy Friday. Doing well, Rachel. How are you?
I'm good. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Denver Broncos because even though they fill in a lot of holes, people are still asking the question, where's the biggest weak spot for the Broncos?
Ooh, okay.
I keep seeing this question pop up on my social channels, a lot of other people's, and they're like, okay, well, they filled these spots, but where's the weakest spot now? Where's the weakest link? Great question.
Well, I think it's still kind of a depth thing. Looking around, they're okay, but they could use more depth at defensive line. But actually, I'd say kind of the weakest links right now, I'd say probably are center, where you do have Lloyd Cushenberry back, but they used a 7th round pick on a center, and of course Alex Forsythe. But I think a key name there in the mix is going to be Kyle Fuller, not the corner Kyle Fuller from a couple of years ago, but the center who started some games with Russell Wilson in Seattle, mostly during the 2021 season. I think there's still a question there. There's still questions at tight end. I mean, the fact that they were looking heavily at tight ends in this draft when the value and just other players on the board, when it just wasn't there for them. The tight end run kind of happened before the Broncos went on the clock on day 2. And I think if the tight end run had come a little bit later, you might have seen the Broncos go for that position. But when that tight end run happened early, they had to pivot, and they bring in Adam Troutman, who's somebody that Sean Payton drafted in 2020 and he likes, but so far hasn't become kind of that all-round tight end that I think the Saints expected him to be. He's a good blocker, but hasn't really flourished as a pass catcher. But the fact that they bring him in shows maybe what the Broncos think of the tight end position right now. And then edge rusher is another weak spot just because it's not that you don't have talent there, but it's not talent that you can rely on. It's, Randy Gregory, when he plays, he can be fantastic.
Yep.
But he missed 11 games last year. Baron Browning, he's developing reasonably well, but can he get all the way there to kind of take advantage of the natural physical gifts that he has? That's still an outstanding question. And Nick Bonito, last year's 2nd-round pick, really is just somebody who is a pass rush specialist and not someone you run out there every down. And frankly, I think one of the reasons why they picked Drew Sanders, who is an inside linebacker that can bounce to the edge as well, is because maybe they're not fully on board with Nick Bonito and his development at this point. And it's sort of interesting theme of the Broncos draft is that you go throughout the draft and every pick they had was at a comparable spot in recent years, basically almost trying to correct a draft of recent years almost.
It's literally, I was just about to say that. It feels like all they're trying to do is correct or improve last year's draft class, especially. Like that, it just feels like that's all they're doing. It's not like any of those players has essentially, quote unquote, popped off by any means. And so then it just leads to the bigger question of George Payton. You're putting all this trust. Well, you saw what he did last year, and not a lot of things went very well for the players that he did, and yet here we are again with a new draft class. And of course, you can't just fire him right after the season. I totally get that, but there was a lot of trust, which makes me believe he's on a very fine line that if this class doesn't improve, that he's going to be gone.
Well, I would say also in terms of those day 2 picks, those 3 day 2 picks, 2 of them were actually correcting Elway picks. Okay. Because Marvin Mims Jr., he's there because KJ Hamler can't stay healthy. And Hamler was Elway. It was the Elway draft of 2020. Riley Moss, right down to the school, University of Iowa. Well, you're probably not making that pick if Michael Ojemudia had worked out as a third round pick in 2020. But Ojemudia had some promise late in his rookie season, then got hurt in 2021, never really got it all the way back. And they cut him last year, and then you're taking Riley Moss. I think that's what that is. the one thing, you did have Damari Mathis as a fourth rounder last year, but I don't think Riley Moss is there to replace Damari Mathis. I think that's more, okay, we need more corner depth than we have. And if OJ Mudia had worked out, you would be pretty well stacked there. So I think that's sort of where it stands. But certainly, yeah, it's a fair point on George Payton. Even though you didn't have the great draft capital last year, you didn't have great draft capital this year. It's still worth noting on that that there have been some whiffs here over the last couple of years. And trading for Troutman, if Greg Dulcich had shown that he could be that all-round tight end that the Broncos hoped he would be, then perhaps you're not trading for Adam Troutman. But here you are. You're making that deal because Dulcich, while he was a pretty good pass catcher when he was out there, couldn't stay healthy, and that's where I think he really is suffering right now in terms of his development. He missed all that time. You knew he could catch the ball. You knew he could run good routes. He showed that at UCLA. Everybody knew it's going to be the blocking that takes some time, and so you lose those OTA reps, you lose those training camp reps, early season practice reps. You're not developing as a blocker, which he needed to do. And now you have someone in Troutman who might well be taking reps that Dulcich would have otherwise got. So we'll see what happens this year. But Dulcich is in an interesting spot.
No, 100%. And Troutman, what grade do you give him, realistically?
You mean just on his career so far?
Yeah, like a C, a B minus?
A C.
Oh.
Third round pick. And he's shown that he can be dependable in the run blocking game. So we're not talking about somebody who has been a bust by any sense of the imagination. But has he been spectacular, notable to this point? Not really. And so, yeah, you'd say C because you'd say relative to his draft position, he's been pretty average. And now he's in that make or break year, that fourth year that usually is the fork in the road for so many players in this league. And he's going to a new team, but he's going to the coach that clearly still believes in him. So that's one to watch. And I know Cecil wrote about Adam Troutman this morning over at denversports.com. I mean, he could be somebody who emerges and has a really solid year. But at the same time, the necessity of bringing in Troutman also reveals what you've done at the tight end position in recent years was not enough.
True. Or, on the other note, it could show just who's really in charge down there at Dove Valley. And it's Sean Payton, and he doesn't like what he saw out of some of the other guys. And so he said, no, we're going to bring in my guy. It's a coin flip about what's going on down there for sure. Have you heard any more about what's going to happen with Kareem Jackson, K-Jack?
Haven't heard anything recently, of course. It's like when last we saw the Broncos were in conversations with him, I don't think that door is closed. But at the same time, I think they would like to see what some of these younger safeties have. Of course, you have Caden Stearns, who missed 12 games last year to injury. If you gave the Broncos the truth serum and said, okay, what would you like to develop this year? Then I think they would tell you they want Caden Stearns to emerge as the starter with Justin Simmons. Because if you have those two, their skill sets are different. Caden Stearns is going to attack up in the box more, but he is a playmaking safety. He had 2 interceptions in just 5 games last year. He had a couple of sacks back in his rookie season. In terms of making plays on the ball, he's extremely efficient, extremely dynamic. But an issue with Stearns is going all the way back to when he was at Texas. He's dealt with some injury that's cost him multiple games, I believe the last 4 or 5 years in a row. So can you keep him healthy? It's the old cliche, the best ability is availability, right? And we haven't yet seen that from Caden Stearns. And then you start getting into the other guys. PJ Locke, they bring him back. He's more of a special teamer at this point. You've got De'Aaron Turner-Yell. Every snap DTY played last year was on special teams. He did not play a single defensive snap. Think about that. With all the injuries the Broncos had,
Yeah.
and he couldn't get on the field on defense, only on special teams. And they pick a day 3 safety this year, and of course DTY was the day 3 safety last year. So I would say that JL Skinner probably has an edge on Turner Yell if you're talking about, okay, who's maybe going to be that last safety in the room. And since we know how important special teams is, so it could come down to, say it's Turner Yell or PJ Locke, which one is more important on special teams, which one distinguishes himself the best. And we won't really learn that right now, and we won't get a read on that probably until well into the preseason.
Okay, well, it is Friday, and we do this Ask Us Anything Friday. So if you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comments, and Mace and I will answer. It's not DMAC today. I get to do it with Andrew Mason. This will be fun. But Mace, my other question to you is, when it comes to K-Jack and, bringing back somebody in that position, have we heard of any other talks for any other positions? Because it kind of feels like even though they're missing depth at some spots, there's still some holes that I feel like could come into play.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything at this moment. Doesn't mean they can't do it. And we know the Broncos are operating really close to the vest right now.
Have you talked to anybody down with the Saints? I'm not sure if you have any, close friends down there. I'm just wondering if this was what they experienced for all the years with Sean Payton as well.
Well, I haven't talked with anybody, but I've done, I've done some digging into, kind of what their processes were over the years. And with Sean Payton, first of all, the Broncos going really tight and closed. Mm-hmm. The Saints were relatively tight and buttoned up, but not to this degree. This is kind of on another level, basically just punting the off season in terms of availability. Now that being it, but it's different. But no, but I have not talked to anybody in New Orleans. I don't have a lot of contacts down there. But the reputation around the league, and I heard this from a couple of people when I was at the Combine that I knew, and it's basically like, good luck with that guy.
Great.
But that's just okay. That's media, right? All right.
True.
I mean, one thing we do know is that Peyton has his people. They tend to be more national in that regard, and of course, he just worked at Fox Sports as well. So it's something to get used to. It's not something that it affects anyone more than me or those of us in the beat media. You get used to it. I don't think people want to hear us complain about it. At least all they don't want to hear us complain about is the Broncos win, because that's ultimately what it's about. If the Broncos come out and go 10-6, 10-7, 11-6 this year, then you know what? Nobody's going to care that everything was really tightened up compared to previous years at Broncos headquarters. So it is what it is. We know we're not important.
How long do you think the quote-unquote leash is for how many games Broncos country will give Sean Payton? They come out and they go 2-2. Do you think people, I don't want to say throw a fit, I feel like that's disrespectful to the fans, but are unhappy and said this is not acceptable?
Depends on who the 2-2 comes against. That's the thing. We'll get the schedule on Thursday, and I think we're going to have a more concrete idea then how maybe we expect the season to go. If you're 2-2, but you open the season with, say, some combination of Kansas City, the Los Angeles Chargers, say Minnesota or Detroit out of the NFC North, and Miami. If you open 2-2 with that, I think it'll be pats on the shoulder. Good job. You got this thing on track. If you open 2-2 against the Raiders, the Texans,
what if you lose to the Jets?
The Patriots, the Jets? Oh, if you lose to the Jets in week 1, okay, that'll be interesting. Because that's going to affect people on a visceral level. I have said I want that game early just to get it out of the way, but I can see why the Broncos may not want that game right away. Because if you come out there in week 1 and you lose to Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers, it's gonna be a how do you do around
God.
here. But the thing is, I think Sean Payton's gonna actually have plenty of rope this year and plenty of slack to, you know, and plenty of trust, I think, as well. Ultimately, I know it's been a rough few years, but I think if it's not going well, but there's evidence of a plan, I think people are going to be okay with that. And I think one thing I have seen with Sean Payton, and one thing I can say about the moves that he's made this year is this. I feel like he's playing the long game. Start with off-season work.
I feel that.
Last year they've already had meetings and worked on installing the scheme for a few weeks at least on the mental side of installing the scheme. This year, those first couple of weeks, they just run and lift. That's it. No meetings. They didn't even issue jersey numbers until this week, which you don't do that and announce that until you need to, right? Once you get to phase 2 and you start doing some individual on-field work, not offense versus defense, at that point, that's when you need the jerseys. But they just kind of, they bypassed that for the first few weeks of that. So, I mean, they didn't do the voluntary minicamp that they were entitled to do with a new coach because they wanted to just focus on the basics. So that tells me they're not in a rush to get everything installed and developed conceptually. That it's going to be, okay, we're going to get this done this year and then expand on that in future years. We're going to this year is going to be about getting kind of core competencies down for the team this year. Then in future years, you build on that, on offense and defense. So because of that, that's a big evidence of Sean Payton playing the long game here.
It's 5 years for him, right?
It's 5 years, but I think realistically, I mean, you gotta show you're in the right head in the right direction in 2, and then be back to the playoffs and back to something consistent in year 3. I think if you're talking about a Sean Payton arc, if this year is a groundwork year, establishing your culture, maybe even finding out who's in and who's out, next year becomes the year where you want to see things come together, and maybe you make the playoffs, maybe you don't, and then the year after that, where you really should have figured it out by then. And the other thing that's looming over this is the quarterback question, right? Because when you're evaluating the roster and you're evaluating who's in, who's out long term, that includes Russell Wilson. Yeah. And if he does well and he shows that he buys in, that's the easiest thing. Broncos country should want Russell Wilson to figure it out and be the quarterback for the next few years. Okay, that is the easiest path here. Because if he doesn't, you can move up and get Caleb Williams or Drake May in next year's draft. But it's going to cost you a lot. Because the other thing on a Sean Payton team is this. I don't think it's going to bottom out to where everyone's like, oh my gosh, they're 3-14. I don't think that's happening. Yeah. I think the absolute floor is 6 or 7 wins. If everything goes wrong, I think the floor is higher than the Broncos finish last year because they're going to do things conceptually, because they're going to improve the special teams, which is always a priority of a Sean Payton team. They're going to do those things, and that's going to allow them to win some games that they would have lost last year. So even if Russell Wilson doesn't figure it out, this is still going to be a competitive team that is in most games.
Gosh, I hope that is the floor because I don't think we can do another season like last year. We got a question from Troy. Any guilty pleasures you're willing to share?
Oh, guilty pleasures.
I can answer mine because I had a second to think about it. Mine's actually kind of basic, but mine is just reality TV. I love a good episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I don't care what anyone says. I love it, especially too. This is going to kind of sound bad, but when the worlds cross over into sports, which we know they love to date in the sports world, I love it. I love the crossover. Now for you.
Okay.
It's a hard question.
It is a hard question. Guilty pleasures. Every time I go to an amusement park, I always feel guilty about how much money I spend.
Fair.
But I'm one of those who goes in and, if you walk into a store at Disney World, you end up coming out with something. I'm kind of that way, or at any other place I go. Ice cream. I was thinking about this. If if I wanted to put myself in trouble, I would have ice cream every day.
Oh,
I could easily have I could have ice cream, frozen custard, whatever. Like
mm-hmm.
sweet frozen stuff
Mm.
is just I lose it on that.
Now I'm craving a Chick-fil-A milkshake.
Ooh, yeah. My daughter actually, like my wife and my daughter had Chick-fil-A yesterday, and
So good.
brought it back, and I was a little envious of them, but yeah,
So
especially with Chick-fil-A, the peach milkshake. But and by the way, speaking of which, did you hear about this place that's going to open downtown
no.
that charges? Okay, I retweeted this morning. It is a milkshake chain. It's called. Let me find it here. The Yard Milkshake Bar. It opens next Friday. Okay. And they have these absolutely decadent milkshakes.
Mm.
Each one, like the main milkshakes, if you look on the menu, $20.70. So it's nearly a 21. So if you add in a tip and tax, that's going to be like a $24 milkshake.
Are they huge? They're
Well,
gonna be like this big, and I can share them with 4 people.
well, let's see here. I'm going to show you the picture. This is on 9 News today. Let's see here. You
They
keep
do
the.
look good.
They do look good. They do look big. You keep the jar.
Wow. Go check out Andrew Mason on Twitter, and you can see it. Delicious, but $24 for a milkshake.
I mean,
Holy
that's
smokes.
I don't know, and it's
It's a little wild.
but there's a part of me that's curious, right? Like sometimes, like you see something so absurd, and that's what may draw people in. Like, okay, a $21 milkshake or 20, like I said, 24 with tax and all that. Okay, what makes it so good? And then you get over there, and you might be like, oh yeah, okay. I mean,
No.
I've paid a lot for things before. I think. Have you ever been to any of the Ghirardelli shops anywhere?
Yes. So
Okay.
good.
They have a they have a mint chocolate milkshake there.
Mm.
And it's mint. It's got fudge on it. It's got dark chocolate. The whole 9 yards.
Yep.
And that thing is like $11. Okay, so it's not cheap. So maybe I'm too quick to impugn the milkshake and the expensive milkshake when I've partaken of something that isn't in the 20-some dollar range, but
True.
isn't cheap for a milkshake, right? Now,
Yep.
if you want a good cheap milkshake, you mentioned Chick-fil-A.
Mm.
When the peach milkshake hits next month, that
Correct.
is sinful. So yeah, that's when we talk about guilty pleasures. I think it's everything ice cream and ice cream related, frozen custard, whatever. Bring it. I had a blueberry and raspberry frozen custard from Culver's a couple of nights ago. I mean, that's just yum.
Yum.
Don't need it, but yum.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question we'll get to because we are over an hour is what are the chances of bringing back Shelby Harris? Good question.
I haven't heard of any rumblings in that regarding bringing him back. He'd be a good fit for the rotation in there. But at the same time, one of the things about the offseason and when you get to OTAs in particular is you want to find out how far your young players have come. And looking at the Broncos defensive line room right now, you've got veterans like Zach Allen, DJ Jones, Mike Purcell. You have 2 second-year guys that you drafted last year, Enia Wazirike and Matt Henningsen. Henningsen's got a high motor, high-energy player. Wazirike, I thought, played better down the stretch. I think he's got a pretty high ceiling, but he's somebody you're trying to develop. And I think the Broncos want to see where those 2 players go before they bring in another veteran. If they need another veteran presence, they've got Jonathan Harris there in the room as well. So I think it's something that maybe with Shelby Harris they may look into later if he's available. And they don't see something they like. The other thing to consider, as far as like you have Sean Payton coming in, yes, but you have holdover position coaches on the defensive line and the defensive backfield. And so those are the 2 areas where when you look at last year's picks, Damari Mathis at cornerback particularly, and then Henningsen and Wazirike on the defensive line, they probably have a leg up on other players at other positions who are trying to prove themselves when they're inherited by Sean Payton. And so that's something I think to consider as well. And I think was a reason why they didn't really end up picking defensive line, even though you could have probably added somebody there. I know one guy they liked was Keanu Benton out of Wisconsin, but he kind of like the tight ends. He went off the board not long before the Broncos selected. I think part of why they went was receiver as well. They really did like Marvin Mims, and they were willing to trade up for him. But also some other players that they had kind of in their sights didn't fall to them.
Okay, well, it's definitely interesting and something to keep an eye on. Loved Shelby when he was here, so I was always sad when he went to Seattle in the trade for Russell Wilson, but would definitely be willing to bring him back for sure. Mace, thanks so much for hanging out with us and for sharing your guilty pleasures. And everybody,
my pleasure.
Happy Cinco de Mayo. If you're not going to go spend $21 on a milkshake, maybe go get 2 margaritas to celebrate the day as well. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. Nuggets tonight. Oh, Mace, last question for you. Nuggets or Suns? Who you got tonight?
I've got the Nuggets. I think this is headed towards the old cliche gentleman's sweep.
Oh, I love it.
If Chris Paul isn't going to be out there tonight, I don't think the Suns get it done. I think this is Nuggets in 5.
All right, well, we will hope for that. Maybe even I'm going for a sweep. Let's just get it done, get it over with, get these guys some rest for sure. That's going to do it for Coffee Break. We'll be back 10:30 a.m. on Monday morning, and we'll see you guys all then. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye.